The real challenge is that Asia is going to grow by 1.6 billion people in this period, which means Asia will grow by more than what will be the entire population of North America, Europe, and Latin America combined, which is one of the reasons why people are calling this the Asian century. MasterCard estimate that by 2015, there will be around 400 million people in China and India alone who are earning enough to travel internationally. They also estimate that by 2020, that figure could reach 1 billion. So we know population change is creating some fantastic opportunities, but also going to have an enormous climate change footprint. The second challenge is what we mean by a life is actually up for grabs. What we know is that the patterns in life expectancy tend to follow what's happening in Europe. Today, across the developing world, life expectancy varies between about 50 and 70. In Europe, average life expectancy is now 80. But if you're aged under 50, there is a 90% chance that you will live to 100. Is science coming through now that's looking at the building blocks of the human gene, at the proteins, and looking at a worm called the nematode worm that has a similar protein structure to humans, so we can experiment on the worm. And what they've discovered is a protein that if you stop it functioning, extends the life of the worm by 3 to 5 times. Those scientists now believe they found the same protein in humans. Think about it. How do you motivate a 170-year-old reservations clerk? What do you buy your partner for their 200th birthday? What about marriage? Here's a challenge. Some of us struggle with a deal that lasts 60 years. Imagine saying yes and that committing you to 200. Would we make divorce compulsory after 30? Now, what do we know? We know that with a growing population and an aging population, that puts strains on two things. One is urbanization. Already 50% of the planet is urbanized. The second is our food supply. We've seen what's going on in the food chain at the moment. We've seen massive rises in prices. We also know that even if we just carried on at current consumption rates, if the developing world didn't want to consume any more, we know that we're growing food production at about 2% a year. But we're growing food demand at about 3.2% a year. And that gap is going to grow. So we have a challenge. And the food industry is actually, bless it, coming up with some quite innovative solutions to the problem. One is around looking at actually not relying on animals to produce meat. Test tube meat, there are a number of experiments going on to say, can we grow meat? But even more interesting for me is a radical reinvention going on of the concept of farming. Today, a 1-acre farm produces 1 acre of food about 40% of the time. If I can take that 1 acre and I move it away into the city so it doesn't have to travel, if I then enclose that completely, if I artificially light it, I feed it hydroponically, that 1 acre of land becomes 4 to 6 times more productive. If I then make that a 40 to 80-story building, I'm talking about 1 acre of food giving me 160 times the value of food out of that. So we're seeing some very innovative solutions coming out of other sectors. We also know that economically, we're having to completely rethink our economic models. Traditional economic theory is based on the growth of the US at the end of the last century, or the turn of the century. Predates the internet, predates globalization, it predates the free flow of money across borders. So every year, around Christmas, all the Western economists have this ritual where they all say, and this year China and India can't possibly sustain growth rates of 8 to 10%, their economies will start to collapse. The problem is that if you're these two handsome chaps on the left of your screen, when you wake up on January the 1st every year, your New Year's resolution has one thing at the top of it, which is to create 25 million more jobs. Because if you don't do that, unemployment will increase. In order to do that, you have to grow your economy at 8 to 10%. 1.1 billion in India, 1.3 billion in China. This is an experiment that's never been tried before, to turn those into market economies. So we need a new economics. There isn't a model out there that fits where the world is going. So that's one of our biggest challenges, that the economic theory we use to drive our businesses and our countries is actually up for grabs. Now, it's fine to lobby, it's fine to have the campaigns to justify why we're not as bad as other industries. My problem is I've never seen a good argument or a good piece of lobbying stop a glacier from melting or stop a hurricane from ravaging people's lives. We face a fantastic challenge on resources on the planet. If we want to carry on consuming just at current rates, we would need 2 planets worth of resources. If the developing world actually wanted to consume at the same rate as Europe, we would need 3 planets. If the developing world wanted the silver medal in the consumption Olympics and wanted to consume at the same rate as the US, we would need 5 Olympics. And to get gold medal standard, to consume at the same rate as California, we would need 8 planets. So we know we need some really innovative solutions around resources and the use of resources. And the challenge is, how do you make sense of all that, and what does it mean for us? So the work we've been doing in the Middle East is to say, well, how do you make sense of the global trends, the industry trends, and the development plans, and what does that mean for you? And to really lay that out as a timeline. Because when you do that, you can start to see where the issues come out. Where will you face water shortages? Where might you have climate issues? Where might you have resource issues? Where might you face overcapacity? And what I'd ask you to do is to do the same for your destinations, to understand what the implications are of the plans going on and the developments happening. And I just want to finish with 4 thoughts for you. If we're going to succeed tackling the climate challenge, but more importantly, ensuring an overall sustainable industry, I think we're now faced with 4 challenges. One is to make sure that we think about those different scenarios and we look at the global economy and say, how will we achieve our goals under different economic circumstances? The second is we do have to face up to our environmental footprint and to make sure that we really aren't taking more from the planet than our fair share and that we're protecting it for 7 generations ahead. The third is around talent. In the Middle East alone, we estimate they're going to need 2.5 million extra staff for all those developments. We would argue that in the industry now, we need to be investing in primary schools, in nursery schools, all around the world to provide those feeder staff, and in the remedial education programs for adults to bring them into the industry, to resource all these developments we're doing. And the final one is around resources. If energy prices are going to hit $200 a barrel, if food prices are going to go up, if construction material prices are going to go up, then actually it becomes core to our business plan to make sure that we're developing a low-resource model. It becomes central to the operating model for every one of our industries.